Hey there, Trekkies! Welcome to TrekLad, the place to be for balanced Star Trek reviews, analysis, theories, and discussion. Hello there, I'm Michael, aka the TrekLad, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're keeping well. Today, well, we're talking Picard, aren't we? We're going to be looking back at Picard's second season, third episode, Assimilation. As always, as the last couple of weeks have seen, I'll be breaking down the episode scene by scene, and in some instances, frame by frame, to seek out references, hidden meanings, and to also, generally, give you my thoughts on what I believe worked and what didn't. As always, please feel free to get involved in the discussion via the chat. I'd love to know what you thought about this episode. Alright, let's say hello. Let's say hello. Let's see what is going on today. Hello, Donnie. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining. And to Jonathan, hello. Welcome. I hope you are both doing well. Get involved in the chat. Come say hello. Like I said, we're going to be breaking this down. We're going to be going through the episode, the latest episode, scene by scene, frame by frame. An interesting episode. Is it as good as the first two episodes that followed? Or preceded it? I don't know. It's all kind of one big homogenized storyline, isn't it? And what I try and do with Picard, and what I'm trying to do with most modern Star Trek shows these days, perhaps with the exception of Lower Decks and Prodigy, is trying to hold back on giving a general review, because it's not episodic. I think it's fair to judge it based on everything that we see at the end, and that's the reason why I haven't done any Discovery videos. I'm going to be doing a Discovery Season 4 review this coming Friday, so join me if you wish to discuss Season 4, 8 PM GMT. I've not actually watched the end of the season yet, so I've got some catching up to do, but alas, we are not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Picard. So yeah, general thoughts before we get into the scene-by-scene, frame-by-frame analysis. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think this season is miles better than what we got in Season 1. As you know, if you're new to the channel, I'll tell you again, didn't like Season 1. Didn't like Season 1 at all. But Season 2 so far is off to a great start. The pacing's really tight. I don't know if you guys have noticed that as well, but it's flowing much easier. If you consider where we were this time last season, by the end of episode 3, we'd only just got on the La Sirena. We'd only just started the adventure. So much faster pace this season, which I'm very grateful for. And yeah, it's just flowing a lot nicer. And there seems to me that there's a firmer grasp on the characters and also what they're attempting to do this season. That's at least in my humble opinion anyway. Right, so general synopsis. In a desperate attempt to save their way of life, Picard and the La Sirena travel back to 21st century Los Angeles. They must find a mysterious watcher, a being who can help them identify the temporal divergence that, if left unchecked, will lead to the totalitarian nightmare. I'll say that again. Totalitarian nightmare they had barely escaped. So that's Picard, Season 2, Episode 3, Assimilation, in a nutshell. The episode was written by Kylie Rossiter and Christopher Monfetti, and, interestingly, directed by Lee Thompson, who some may remember as starring as Mama McFly in, yes, another time travel classic, Back to the Future. She also appeared in Jaws 3D, for those of you who love watching rubbish movies. I know I certainly do. Another interesting thing before we do get going is the episode title, Assimilation. Now, obviously that connects to the Borg elements of the episode, the bits involving Jurati and the Queen, but it also leans into the literal meaning of assimilation, the process of becoming similar to something. Now, for me, I took that as, in this case, the crew of the La Sirena having to adjust to 2024 Los Angeles so as not to cause any further damage to the timeline. That's what I took from it anyway. But it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that. I saw it as being a pretty clever episode title, and sometimes modern Star Trek can be a little overthought with some of the episode titles. So there we go. So yeah, almost time to get into this episode breakdown and to deep dive and discuss and get into it. But before we do, a little bit from moi. But before I get into this, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for weekly Star Trek and sci-fi reviews, breakdowns and theories. You can also support the channel by becoming a fan on Patreon. Unlock exclusive perks including access to my private Trek community by beaming over to patreon.com/treklad today. Alright, thanks past Michael, pre-recorded Michael. Let's get into this. Let's go and talk about what happened in Picard Episode 3, Assimilation. Let's do it. Right, so yes, so we pick up pretty much immediately following the events of the last episode. Obviously, it didn't end very well for Picard and the crew of the La Serena. We had the Confederation Magistrate beaming on board to... Well, he wasn't happy, was he? And he was clearly suspecting that there was something wrong with his dear wife. And basically beamed aboard last week and immediately shoots Elnor point blank in the chest. Now, one thing that I do want to quickly point to is I did a little bit of digging on this, because when he got shot, my first thought was, well, he's kind of been shot... He's been shot in the chest, which is obviously never good, and we don't know how dangerous these weapons are. But he's kind of shot in what I perceive to be a non-vital area of the body. Now, having done some digging and some research, looking at Vulcan/Romulan anatomy, the heart is actually on their right-hand side as opposed to the left-hand side. It's also likely, I mean, the heart, the Romulan heart, is actually just a little bit lower than ours usually. It's kind of more just in the middle of the rib cage area, at least looking at the diagrams that I looked at. And it was but the lungs are above, so I mean, definitely punctured a lung probably. An interesting thing as well that I read, thank you very much Memory Alpha, is that Romulans don't suffer heart problems in the same way humans do, because they have enlarged arteries that, well, pretty much mean that congenial heart problems and defects are pretty much non-existent in Romulan culture. But this could be their Achilles heel, because their arteries are so much bigger. The chance of nicking something super important is probably far more likely to happen. So you take it as being a serious injury, and we will get back to Elnor. But yeah, it's not good, is it? The security guards are beamed on board, and Raffi is clearly in a pretty bad place with all this that's going on right now. Her surrogate son has been gunned down before her eyes, and he's got the crew dead to rights. Now, Seven takes the moment. She's got to think quick on her feet. She puts that mask back on from last week, and she says, "How dare you? You know, I'm in the middle of a top secret mission. You know, what are you doing beaming on board?" But the thing is, though, is the Magistrate, he's not buying that. He's seen enough to suspect and come to the conclusion that this is not her. This is not his Annika. This is not the president of the Confederation. So he challenges her. He basically says, you know, I mean, if you are my Annika, my dear Annika, what's my full name? And while all this is going on, Jurati is, fart-arsing in the back. I'll get back to this, but she's basically finishing the process of hooking the Borg Queen up to the La Serena's warp core. I'm assuming that's the warp core. I think they mentioned that is the warp core, so let's just go with that. She's hooked her up to the warp core, completed the connection that began in the last episode. So while all that's going on, the standoff is still happening, and Seven can't answer because she doesn't have a clue who this guy is. Hasn't got a clue. She was ready to cave his head in a few hours ago. The Magistrate is not convinced. I mean, well, she doesn't say anything, so it's a clear sign that, well, it's not the president. So I'm just gonna whack my wife doppelganger round the face, and that's clearly what they do. Raffi is obviously not down with that and attempts to rush. It's not going to work. I'm surprised, to be completely honest, that this Confederation security guard didn't just shoot immediately. I mean, that's the type of people that they are, right? They're cruel, barbaric people. Why didn't they just shoot straight away? So therein is probably my first kind of minor quibble. But anyway, the Magistrate at this point is now pointing his gun at Raffi, which perhaps give Seven the opening that she actually needs to reach for the gun, because it's pointing down. I don't know, easier to grab, I guess. I don't know what this guy's doing. I don't know what he's aiming for. Is he aiming for the ceiling? Don't know. I mean, Rios isn't that tall. Not I imagine. I mean, he might be. I don't know. Anyway, Seven takes the opportunity. She reaches for the gun, and there's, a brief battle ensues, and these security guards, it does not end well for them. I mean, that is as brutal as you can get. I also want to add here that the both security guards had been disarmed at this point. As you can see, Raffi taking hold of the weapon, double teaming with Rios, and then Seven, despite the fact that last season she said that she'd never kill anyone just because that's what they deserved. Well, she obviously forgot that lesson, because they're gone. And this whole effect here reminds me quite a lot of the vaporizing effect that we saw in The Wrath of Khan, when Tyrell vaporizes himself in that really awful scene. And yeah, just horrible, very visceral, and I think they kind of captured that look here. It's not a good way to go, is it? It's not. Anyway, these two have been neutralized. The Magistrate is down there. He's gonna get it, isn't he? And of course he reaches for his weapon, and Raffi does this. She does a thing. She does a barrel roll into a vaporization, and it is au revoir to the Magistrate, who was wonderfully realised by John Briones. We will miss you, or maybe not, I don't know. Anyway, that pretty much wraps up that issue, but as we know from the last episode, the fleet has been activated. The fleet is on its way. They need to get out of there. They need to hightail it out of there, because there's a fleet coming. Even though the Magistrate's dead, I imagine they don't know that. They're still going to fire. Anyway, their attention turns to Elnor, who is clearly not in a good state. They need to get him down to sickbay, or whatever it is they call sickbay. Raffi is, understandably upset by the situation, and Picard turns around to Rios in a wonderful line. He's like, "Get us the hell out of here! Get the hell out of this shithole," or something, or whatever he says. And the La Serenia makes sail for the sun to begin their slingshot maneuver a la The Voyage Home. Can't wait to see that. Back in sickbay, Seven and Raffi have got Elnor down there. Now Elnor is in pain. I mean, he wasn't shouting and screaming while that kerfuffle was happening. I can only assume that moving him probably didn't help, unless they did a site-to-site transport. I don't know, we didn't see it. Anyway, that looks like a gnarly weapons burn. That looks like a nasty shot. The one thing that I do want to say, and it's another quibble of mine, there are going to be plenty of quibbles in this episode, as there are with most Picard, but feel free to let me know what you think in the chat. So, the Magistrate beams aboard, and he shoots Elnor, and he shoots him, and he punctures a hole in him, and it's clearly a serious wound. But the crew gain control of the weapons, so the weapon that Raffi is firing is a weapon that she took off of one of the security guards. Perhaps, I don't think the weapon was taken off of the Magistrate, so it's entirely possible that the Magistrate's weapon was set to deliver the shot to Elnor. Perhaps he didn't want to go in with the vaporization mode set. I don't know. But that does beg the question, why then would the security guards beam in with the vaporization set? It doesn't make sense. And we don't see any sign that the settings have been changed or anything like that. We don't know. So it just seemed odd, really. They basically wrestle these weapons out of the hands of these security guards, and they're set to vaporize, but the Magistrate's isn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem to... It doesn't add up to me. The only thing that I can speculate on is that he just didn't want to vaporize his wife in the small chance that she wasn't. I don't know. It's weird. Let's move on. Anyway, so yeah, it's not looking good. And here's another interesting thing. Here's the reason why I think that the Confederation weapons will probably just be set to vaporize by default. In the same way Romulan disruptors are set to kill by default, and that's something that we know. But Raffi is panicking. She's frantically looking around. She can't find a medical tricorder. She can't find a medikit. She can't find anything. All they can find are some emergency, essentially like an emergency press wipe to stick on to help with a burn. And that's all that they have. So my question is, and I think the show doesn't explicitly say this, but it might be subtly saying it, which is a massive tick in the subtlety box for this show, is it stands to figure the Confederation probably just don't give a crap about their personnel, and in this horrible barbaric vision of the future, yeah, they probably just don't care about medical instruments or medical patches or kits or medicine or anything like that. I mean, we saw in the previous episode that Starfleet seemed to be operating with just a one kind of grey uniform, no divisional colours, no nothing. So maybe they just don't have a medical department or a medical division. So anyway, Raffi can't find the medical kit, and that's not good. And it's getting worse because the La Serena are under fire from what appears to be the fleet, and we'll get a better look at these ships in a minute. I will say that for a fleet, that's a tiny fleet. That's 3 ships. That's not a fleet. That doesn't, to me, constitute a fleet. Although saying that, I think in Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, they kind of insinuated that more than one ship is a fleet. So maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Put me right in the comments. Anyway, Elnor, yeah, this is really not a good time. They're under fire by the Confederation fleet. Let's just call them a fleet. And Elnor is in serious trouble. Rios is trying to balance, whatever he's doing here. And I have questions about this. I've always had questions about this readout because Rios seems to be able to fly the ship. He seems to be able to do quite a lot. He can beam personnel aboard from his position. He can fire weapons from his position. He can control communications from his position. So, I mean, I don't know what Picard is doing. It's not really made explicit. But basically, Rios, from what we understand in previous episodes, can pretty much control what is going on. He can control the entire ship here. But he calls up and he says, I need more hands. And Seven turns to Raffi, and Raffi says, I've got this. And Seven rushes off to the bridge to give aid to Rios, leaving Raffi to tend to a very in trouble Elnor. And we cut back, and we're going to get some better shots of these, but I do like these ships, and I will get into my reasons as to why. Very, very cool. Anyway, so Seven arrives on the bridge. Picard asks how Elnor is. No response, which tells you that... I mean, I was always told that no news is good news, but that's clearly not the case here. There's a very grave look that Seven gives Picard, and we will get into repercussions of that very shortly. Here we see our one and only appearance of Q in this episode, who has 2 lines. He delivers 2 lines, and that is it. And I want to read the 2 lines that he says, because there's a lot that could potentially be extrapolated from them. And his lines are... So Picard looks up, he sees Q, and Q says, "This is the only kind of life you understand. Shall we see what else has been lost in the wake of your fear?" That's kind of vague, isn't it? That's vague. I'm not sure what's being hinted at there. It seems to me... I mean, I tried looking into the words that he has to say, and let's try and kind of disseminate them a little bit. So, this is the only kind of life you understand. So, perhaps Q here is referring to Picard's need first for adventure, his need to be among the stars, which has obviously already been something that's been discussed in previous episodes, running to the stars. And in this instance, what are they doing? They're running away. They're running literally towards a star. So this is the only kind of life you understand. The second line is far more interesting for me. Shall we see what else has been lost in the wake of your fear? Fear of what? Fear of death, fear of life, fear of running, fear of staying, fear of Starfleet, fear of the Confederation. What could it mean? Could it mean and I'm theorising here, could it be that, shall we see what else has been lost in the wake of your fear? So that is signalling to me that Q knows what's about to happen. He knows what's on the horizon. He knows what's coming. And my theory is, and it's a bit of a wild one maybe, love to know your thoughts, what if Q... What if the reason for the Confederation is not because of the temporal incursion or whatever it's called in the show? What if it's actually directly caused by something that Picard does, fearing or wanting to avoid the future that they're escaping from? So that's an interesting thing. What if Picard is so bent on changing the past to benefit the future that he accidentally causes the very future that he's attempting to stop, to prevent? So an interesting thing there. But this is literally the only time we see Q in this entire episode. It's essentially a cameo. It's a good cameo, though. It raises questions. And yeah, questions that I absolutely hope do get answered. But anyway, before Picard can even respond, Q's gone. So yeah, he calls out to Jurati, basically going, what's taking so long? What's the problem here? Jurati is still trying to plug in the Queen. Maybe more complicated. I mean, when Rios went and plugged in that first connection, it kind of went in, well, the Queen wanted it to go and she wanted that power. So there's obviously something that's preventing this from happening. Anyway, the ship is rocked by some weapons fire, and in a moment that I kind of thought looked kind of funny, it looked like something out of, I don't know, a slapstick comedy. It looked like something out of, I don't know, a Jim Carrey movie. The Queen just falls like face plants, and very, very clumsy. But basically, I mean, they're at the point that they're flying towards this sun. Time is not on their side. Rios needs to get these ships off his back, so he arms photon torpedoes, asks Seven, or basically orders Seven to aim for a nacelle, and Seven hits and fires. So they fire an aft torpedo, which, I mean, these guys, I mean, their aim is absolutely junk. It's rubbish. They fire, and it's a direct hit on the deflector dish. Or, I mean, as we know in this universe, they might not even be deflector dishes. They might just be, more weapons, more phaser banks and torpedo launchers. But it's a direct hit, and it completely takes out the ship. I mean, we see an explosion here, and then we see explosions in the nacelles. So my question is, and we already see here that the La Serena is running with shields up. I mean, I'm assuming that's shields. And are these ships not running with shields? The La Serena has shields up, the Earth has shields up, but 3 warships, part of the Confederation's war machine, are running against an enemy with seemingly no shields? Why is that? That seems dumb. It seems dumb. I mean, there's no kind of indication that there's any shield impact here, and I know in the past we've seen a direct hit kind of cause a bit of a flame, and you'd see like a shield bubble, or you'd see some indication that there's a shield. Not here. That looks like a serious impact blow on one of those Nova class ships. I don't know why they're in combat and they're not running with shields on. Maybe they were just super confident, bordering on cocky, that they were like, well, this is one tiny little ship, what can they possibly do? But surely they must know that these ships are currently on the front line in the Vulcan conflict, so they must know that they can kind of deal some blows. It's weird. It's stupid. Anyway, they're pretty happy with that. And we go to the back of the ship, and the Borg Queen has recovered from being thrown on her face, and in a wonderfully creepy moment crawls towards Agnes, and the 4-note piece of music that Jerry Goldsmith very famously put together for First Contact repeats once again. That did rear its head twice in the last episode, and I really loved its return. So I'm not the biggest fan of Jeffrey Russo's music, And this isn't Jeffrey Russo's music. This is him just kind of riffing on something that already exists. It's a good piece of music. I would definitely steal it for this scene. It's very evocative of the Borg and the Borg Queen herself. And she says, well, let me pretty much take it from here. And she Borgs some chords out of nowhere. She does a Borg thing, and she powers up the warp core, ready to go. Very, very cool imagery here. Very, very evocative of something that would become a recurring motif through this episode at least, and it may be through the rest of the season. We'll get onto that. And it pretty much starts taking over the ship, starts assimilating the ship, and we see here that Rios's, I'm assuming it's Rios's primary readout, other than the holo screen that he has, becomes Borgified. Control of the ship is lost, so this basically just changes to a brand new form of Borg display system, a new graphic interface, and Rios is like, I have no control over my ship. And here we get, so basically what we see in this scene is the Queen is neutralizing targets. So she neutralizes enemies, takes over the ship. Rios knows that he hasn't got control, and the La Sirena fires two very green looking, we can only assume, photon torpedoes at the remaining ships. I have to assume that the other ships have been destroyed. The other ship, anyway, has been destroyed. And here's probably our best shot of the two ships. Now, from my understanding, these ship designs were provided by Eaglemoss, who have the designs in their database, so they were able to reproduce. This is a steam runner. So this was seen in, I think it was seen for the first time in First Contact. It's very similar to the Orbereth class. So you've basically got a very unusual primary hull. The secondary hull... literally, so the Bussard collectors connect to the primary hull. It's a really strange ship design. It's very different from anything that we've seen Star Trek ships look like before, but it's, I mean, I'm all for a different design. I assume in our Prime universe they were probably designed with the Borg combat in mind to be lightweight vessels, and then when they weren't in a time of war to maybe serve the same function as the Orbereth and to be primarily scientific vessels. The second ship is one that I was far happier to see return, and this is a Nova class. So this is the same ship as we saw in Voyager in the episode Equinox. It's literally the same ship as the Equinox. I think we've seen them in a few other episodes as well. Off the top of my head, I think we have seen them. I think, if I remember correctly, we saw one in Lower Decks, but I think to my knowledge this is the first time we've seen them back in live action since First Contact. Again, I might be wrong there. I'm sure there's probably some secret Easter egg cameos. But anyway, the Queen fires two torpedoes, again aiming for these deflector dishes, and or if they are deflector dishes. Now they're very evocative of the Enterprise E, that Sovereign design deflector. Maybe not so much the Nova, but definitely the Steam Runner. And we can see that second torpedo there just about to impact. What I like about this, and obviously it makes sense given the fact that the Confederation is evil, but it's one thing that I remember watching on the Wrath of Khan director's cut in some of the special features. They said that they intentionally designed the lighting on the Reliant to be red, to be evocative of a ship that is evil. And it's quite hard to make a ship look evil, or so maybe they thought before. It's amazing what a little bit of red can do. You change these colours to something a little bit more welcoming, maybe blue, and they look fine. But no, red means evil, and these two ships, they get their comeuppance. Again, my question though at this point is, they've seen what the La Sirena has done to the other Nova class. Why didn't they think to put their shields up? Do these ships not have shields? Because these ships are crippled. I mean, they're practically destroyed. We don't see them again. They're either neutralized or they are destroyed. It doesn't look good for them. Put your shields up, for Christ's sake. Anyway, Rios's expression is pretty much exactly the same as ours. What the and he doesn't complete the F-bomb, which I really appreciated. I mean, it's always nice to see a little bit of restraint. Doesn't swear. But yeah, his reaction is pretty much the same as ours. The Borg took over the ship, and yeah, she pretty much fixed the problem. Well done her. And here's where we see the new Borgified graphical interface. And look, I'm going to bring this up again in a bit because I do perceive there to be some issues here. But and also shout out to Seven's footwear. I do not know how ladies walk in shoes like this. Massive respect. Anyway, their problems are solved, or, well, I mean, the immediate problems are solved anyway, and they can begin their slingshot maneuver. Rios tells Picard that he is no longer in command of the ship, and the Borg Queen is ready to do her thing, work her magic, right? And she has some very interesting things to say as well. So she says, move backward to go forward, shatter to mend, the past is now. Very dramatic delivery, very traditional Borg Queen delivery. I'm not really sure kind of what purpose it served in the actual universe, other than to just tell us that some timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, moving in space-time through a sun thing was about to happen. It looked cool. It looked cool, and that's what Star Trek can kind of do pretty well, but can it think well? We will find out. Agnes is looking on in awe, and yeah, the process begins. They go to warp, and yeah, Jurati needs to strap herself in. Although, again, I'm going to mention that in a second. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Borg Queen later on, because she features in this episode a lot, and I was very impressed with what I saw. Agnes straps in, and they complete, well, they're about to begin their daring maneuver through the sun. It's a cool upgrade on what we saw in the voyage home, obviously benefiting from much more advanced technology now. It's wonderful what we can see on our small screens. But yeah, the last arena goes into this kind of vortex. It reminded me quite a lot of the vortex that we see being created by the Borg sphere in First Contact. It's very different, of course, but and the gravimetric, the whole design of this method of time travel is obviously completely different. But I do wonder if perhaps the Borg maybe adapted the maneuver based on, you know, maybe some personnel that they assimilated that knew that the Federation had done slingshot maneuvers in the past. An interesting thought there. Anyway, this is a pretty cool scene, and this pretty much takes us to the credits. So another thing that I do want to point out here is Rios is reading out the warp speed. He's reading out the velocity in a way that, I mean, this scene already evokes quite a lot of the voyage home, that slingshot to go back to mid-80s San Francisco, and Rios is doing the warp 5, warp 6, warp 9.2, 9.3, 9.4. My question is, though, and I've squinted at this for a long time, and I'm going to go back to the Borg readout here. So this is the primary console that Rios can see. I can't see any velocity readout there. It's all pretty much just Borg gobbledygook, right? I can't see any velocity readout there. And if we go back to the screen, I can't see any velocity there either. It's quite hard to make out what that is. It doesn't look like there's any kind of velocity readout, and you would think that if Rios was in command, actually in control of the ship, he'd have his virtual readout in front of him. We'd be able to tell you what the velocity is. And this seems like a goof to me. Like, how would he know how fast the ship's going? How would he be able to tell you 9.3, 9.4, 9.5? There's no readout there. How does that work? Unless Rios is a genius, which I am willing to consider. So there's that. Also note the Borg green hue is prevalent throughout the entire ship. That will change very shortly. And they go into this vortex, and we get here. Oh, we get one final shot before the opening credits. We get Raffi. It's not going well. She's strapped in Elnor, and Elnor he's still suffering. It's a terrible time to be Elnor. And yeah, we are getting ready for the trip. We're going back to the past to fix the future, a la Voyage Home, a la First Contact, and we get some really cool visuals here as they enter the vortex. The kind of the softening of the lines, and it's all starting to kind of blur around, and the light, this is the light of the sun, so they're still around there, and then we kind of enter into this kind of very ethereal sequence. And I speculated that there might be some sort of trippy going back in time sequence, because that's what the Voyage Home did, right? But I guess that we weren't going to see heads kind of just morph out of pure whiteness, or we weren't going to see any whales, and we weren't going to see any trippy water, we weren't going to see any artsy-fartsy Leonard Nimoy stuff. But what we get here is kind of cool and a suitable modernization, I guess, of the process. We get a lot of eyes, a lot of slow-motion eyes, and this becomes quite important because in one of the next shots we see a tear, and there seems to be some temporal shenanigans at place, because this tear is rolling up, and we also hear what appears to be like the rolling back of time. It's all very obvious, but the tear is very interesting. What is the tear all about? Is it Agnes appreciating and enjoying what she's seeing and just being in awe of the moment? Is this, as a scientist, we know that she's a cyberneticist, but maybe she has a background in physics, in astrology, and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe this is a dream for her. Maybe this is something that she's always wanted to do. She read the stories. Or maybe being a bit more cynical, as is sometimes, as is often the way in Picard, perhaps this is foreshadowing. Perhaps this is not a good sign. We already know from some exchanges that Jurati had in the last episode that there is some secret sadness, there's some ill-fitting in her personality that I'm sure is going to be explored later on in the season. So I'm taking that could be a bad omen. We will see. Some more shots here, and yeah, it's just the final shot here as we pretty much wrap up this teaser sequence. And this is the final shot that we get before we enter into the credits. And it's a cool one. It's a really cool one. It reminds me a lot of Interstellar, when Matthew McConaughey and the crew they hit the wormhole for the first time and they go to the distant realm of space. They got Kip Thorne, a well-known astrophysicist, to essentially advise them on that production. I don't think they got Kip Thorne for this, but it looks to me like they kind of lifted some stuff, the visuals of the things that we saw in Interstellar. And if you're going to steal from the best, right? And that pretty much wraps up like I said, it's kind of, yeah, so they had to wrap up the sequence with the Magistrate. They had to get them out the way. They had to get the Confederation out the way. They had to move the story forward. And in terms of the pacing, how it moves forward, it's all resolved. It's all wrapped quite neatly and nicely. I have some issues with some of the choices that are being made, and I mentioned them, but I'll go through them again. The inconsistency with the weapons just seems a little bit strange to me. My suspicion, my theory is that the Confederation, being this brutal, totalitarian, galactic regime of interstellar fascists, they would have no room for just merely putting a hole in someone. They just vaporize you, right? So it's kind of weird that the Magistrate beams aboard and his two henchmen beam aboard, and they've got different weapon settings. I am willing to entertain, however, the fact that the Magistrate may have wanted to avoid vaporizing his wife, if it actually was his wife. So I will give you that one. But when the henchmen get neutralized, or when they all get neutralized, it's just very unbecoming of Starfleet. These are heroes from the timeline that we know, and just because they're in this brutal, horrible, nightmarish alternate reality doesn't mean they need to start acting like them. Now, I had a bit of an issue with Elnor just brutally murdering the security guards with the Starfleet Delta in the last episode, and it kind of seems to me like it's just a kind of continuation of what happened there, basically. Seven said in the last episode of the last season that she will not kill someone just because that's what they deserve. These are interstellar space fascists that have murdered countless billions, trillions, countless people. So maybe they deserved it, but it kind of seems at odds with the things that. It seems at odds with the values of Starfleet, but it also seems very at odds with the values of Seven of Nine as we've come to know her. So that was kind of weird. But the other stuff as well, like when you saw Jurati go and fix up the Borg Queen, there's a shot where they spend, there's quite a few shots where it's Agnes and the Queen, and she's going to plug her in, and she's doing all this stuff at the back of the ship. She's not trying to be coy. She's not trying to be quiet about it. Did nobody at the front of the ship, did none of the Confederation personnel hear her rip a panel off the wall? Did no one kind of go, where's the Borg Queen? That didn't seem to be on the agenda. That was kind of weird. But I thought that what we were going to get here, I thought that we were going to get Jurati create a distraction, or Jurati and the Queen working in tandem to create a distraction that would give Seven, Raffi, Rios and Picard the upper hand to neutralise the enemy. But we didn't get any of that. So my question was kind of, why did we get those establishing shots of Jurati and the Queen? We got, it kind of wasn't really needed in that sequence. Not to me, not in my opinion anyway. One other thing I want to go back with Seven when she vaporizes the henchman is we have literally seen her reintroduced in the show as someone who, she was introduced defending the La Sirena, or the La Sirena that we know, against intergalactic space pirates, and she doesn't shoot them, she doesn't kill them, she neutralizes them, and what does she do? She beams them aboard, she beams them off the ship. So we've already seen in this season evidence that Seven has grown from the events that we've seen in season 1. So, you know, I get that the tensions are high and these are, again, interstellar space fascists. But we've seen her do something and then she kind of does the opposite. And if I was rewriting this scene, and I'm never going to be hired to do that, but if I was, just humour me for a second, wouldn't it be cooler if it was actually Seven? I mean, let's say Seven is just going to kill people just because, right? Let's just say she does that. Wouldn't it be much cooler given the interactions that she's had with her quote-unquote husband, the Magistrate? Wouldn't it be just much more satisfying if she was the one that fired off the shot? Like, Raffi doesn't have a clue who this guy is, but Seven has spent some time with him, he's called her a dear and all that kind of stuff. What I would have done is, I mean, I wouldn't have had them vaporized anyway. I would have just had them knocked out, disarmed, because they were also unarmed as well. They were unarmed. They pose no more risk. The guy is literally, he's got his hands behind his back by Seven, and Raffi just shoots him in the chest and vaporizes him. Never mind. Anyway, but I would have had them just be neutralized, just knocked out. Seven can knock out people. Raffi can knock out people. She can do a barrel roll into a giant, massive, jumping front kick. That's what she could do, and neutralize them. So what I would have had as a kind of a poetic revenge for being clocked around the face by the phaser, I would have just had Seven go, by the way, my name's 7 of 9, dear, and then just clock him around the face with a phaser, knock him out, and then beam them onto one of the inevitably just doomed Nova and Steamrunner class ships, and then when the Borg destroys them, then that's blood out of the hands of the heroes. It's something that the Borg Queen's doing. The Borg Queen can destroy ships and people. She can kill people because she's a villain. Seven and Raffi are not villains. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. But also some other little quibbles. You know, when we're entering the sun's orbit and getting ready for the slingshot, the assimilation of the ship, and that's what it was. The computer consoles are being taken over. That is what we perceive to be an assimilation process. The Queen has assimilated portions of the La Sirena's control and functions. So she now pretty much has the ship. But she's committed to helping the crew and getting them back in time. That's why she's not spinning the ship around and going back to the Delta Quadrant. But it's just kind of weird that she takes over control of the ship, and we there's no discernible readouts, but Rios knows exactly how fast the ship's going. Anyway, that's the teaser. That's the first scene. That's the first sequence. Let's go through some of the chat, because oh my goodness, there's quite a lot. Oh, there's quite a lot of comments. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Right, so let's see what we've got here. Very impressed with the actor playing the Borg Queen in episode 3, John Fennell. Yes. It's Annie Wershing, who we've seen in Star Trek before. She appeared in the Enterprise episode Oasis. I know her better for being in, I believe, the final 2 seasons of 24, where she played Special Agent Renee Walker. She's a very good actress, and really, we'll get into it. I have to confess, the new main title sequence and opening theme tune is what I love best about Season 2 of Picard. Alright, okay, well let's go there then, because I've got plenty of things to say about that. So my first thoughts about the theme and the opening sequence was that I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I am pleased to report, however, that it has massively grown on me, simply because I think the story that Picard is trying to tell, the disparate universes, the different timelines, the brokenness of it, the brokenness of the universe, and that's mirrored also, it's mirrored in the shattering of glass. The theme itself, the music, is literally at war with itself. It's the theme that we know from Season 1, from a universe that we know, and then what we're getting kind of very heavy marching, very percussion-heavy led drumming that is highly evocative of the Mirror universe, right? That's what I got from it. So you've kind of got Season 1, then it goes into Mirror Universe, then you kind of get a return to the original theme, then it goes into this nice swelling, this orchestral swelling, and they go into the vortex, and then that's, for me, when the main title sequence really starts to pick up, when you get this the hourglass morph into the Borg Queen, and you get the glass forming a Starfleet Delta super quickly. It's all really cool, and I think it swells really well. I didn't like it when I first heard it, but it has grown on me massively grown on me. What else have we got? Speaking of Star Trek in general, I understand that Paul Wesley got cast as Jim Kirk in Strange New Worlds. Yes, I spoke about it a couple of days ago. It's interesting news. I have thoughts on it. Go check out that video when you get a second if you haven't done so already. Sustus, hello. It was one of my nitpicks also. They are Starfleet. Why go straight for vaporize, not stun? Well, yeah, exactly. That was my thought. I mean, my thought here, though, and going back to what I had said, is I guess the Confederation don't have stun setting. They're just brutal, aren't they? So they probably have 2 settings: stick a hole in poor Elnor and vaporize. So that suggests that they could tweak the settings. I didn't like it, but it's already happened. And yeah, Jonathan, yeah, why the heck did they have no medical supplies? I've already touched on it. I just think in this harsher, more disturbing universe that they just don't care. They just don't care about people that get hurt like that. Maisie, hello. They're in the Mirror Universe. No nice weapons there. Exactly. So they don't vaporize. They're set to cause as much pain as possible while you're dying. No med stuff. People get shot. Yeah, absolutely. What else have we got here before we go into the next scene? When Picard self-destructed the Stargazer, which also triggered the destruction of the Borg and the remaining Starfleet vessels, that could have caused a temporal misalignment in the timeline. Very much so. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that what we see in the first episode bookends the series, so we're going to go back to that. And spatial anomalies and Q usually mean there's some sort of universal issue, right? So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Love the red deflector dish colour of the Confederation ships. Me too. Red is aggressive, blue is calm. Yep, absolutely. Right, okay. What else have we got here as well? I liked this 3rd episode, but at the end I was like, darn it, another cliffhanger. Yeah, well, they gotta keep us on our toes, right? They gotta keep us invested in the furthering of the story. I want to see that Suan character create some legs for the Borg Queen, and maybe she can help the crew out even more. I don't think she's gonna get legs unless she's able to turn some matter and assimilate some matter into legs. That would be kind of weird. I don't think this queen's gonna have legs. She shouldn't really have arms, really, given what we know about the queen that we've seen in the past. The body, they've kind of changed. They've kind of retconned the design of this queen, because the queen's upper torso moves into this, what we perceive anyway to be completely synthetic body. The synthetic body latches onto the organic components, and then she can walk around. Here, it seems to me the lower torso, the body just kind of snaps in two. It's fine. It's fine. I can kind of forgive it. Good chat. Keep it coming. We're going to move into the rest of the episode, and of course we are going into, well, we come out on the other side of the vortex, the lovely vortex. We get a better look at it here. It reminds me actually quite a lot of the anomaly visuals that we see in JJ's Star Trek 2009 movie with Spock's jelly bean ship. Kind of reminds me a lot of that, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because it says temporal disturbance. Anyway, the La Serena fires out of this vortex and heads towards an Earth, and if we do zoom in, we can see, yeah, there's no... doesn't seem to be any shields. This kind of looks good, right? This looks promising. Although, I do think that there should be more space debris in Earth's orbit at this point in 2024. I mean, Elon Musk has got 1,000 bits of space junk orbiting the Earth. That should be visible from this position in space, right? Surely. Anyway, so the crew are pretty much at this point wondering, did they, have they done it? Have they reached where they were looking to get to? And we do hear a powering down of what we soon realise is the Borg Queen and the Borg Queen's components. Now, this is strange to me, and of course it's strange to me because I'm going to nitpick it, but the Borg Queen, from what we saw, assimilated the ship's systems, right? So these readouts, even though the Borg Queen is powered down, there should still be some sort of residual Borgification of ship systems. That's kind of what I take from it. There is, I guess, some... We've seen it in Star Trek before. We saw it in the Enterprise episode Regeneration, where Trip Tucker was trying to depower the Borg components, and as soon as he was able to do that and remove that component, the ship's computer kicked back in, and the Borg graphic user interface kind of kicked out, and normal ship operations were resumed. So that's totally fine. However, there was still the physical Borg components. So maybe it is the case that there is still Borg components in the ship, but because the Queen has powered down, the user interface gets to kind of kick back in again. So I take that one as that seems to be the most likely explanation here. So they're questioning, where are we, basically, and we get Agnes confirm, and she confirms via something that we've heard before, and that is that they're basically looking for clues. They're looking for context clues. So there's no colony on Luna. There's signs of ozone layer depletion, but no nuclear fallout on Earth itself. So, and they deduce that they're pretty much around the time that they wanted to reach, which is obviously good for them. Well done. But a couple of things here that I really liked. The chronometer was basically shot according to Jurati, so they had no way of being able to confirm exactly where they were. So they went to look for things like radiation, which is basically how they established that they were in 2063 in First Contact, and that's also how they determined where they were in the voyage home, so it's been done before. I like that. But also the no nuclear fallout on Earth as well. Well, that's a massive hint at World War III, the massive event, the massive war that left countless millions dead and completely almost destroyed humanity before Zefram Cochrane got things back on track. So I like that call, and 2024 is when they arrive. 2026 is when World War III starts. So another interesting thing to kind of bear in mind as we move forward are the events that we see here. Is it a possible sign that whatever the temporal displacement is, whatever the anomaly is that basically causes our future as we know it to not happen, what if that is the fact that World War III never happens? It would be a very interesting direction to go in, because I would like to imagine the Star Trek showrunners and the current heads of Star Trek probably just don't want to go, well, we need to go to war. It kind of reminds me of the Family Guy episode where Brian and Stewie travel and they inadvertently cause 9/11 to not happen, and they obviously celebrate that because they've saved America from an absolute horrific, well, they saved the world from a massive tragedy, but as it turns out in that episode, unfortunately they needed that to happen, because if that didn't happen, then the world would be destroyed in a nuclear war. But that's Family Guy, and Family Guy and Star Trek they don't go together very well, so it'd be really interesting to see kind of what happens there. But anyway, they know kind of where they are. And Seven reports a couple of things. The navigation controls are offline. The ship at this point is rocking, and they are on a collision course to Earth, which is obviously probably not what you want to happen in 2024, given the fact that, I mean, we as a civilization in 2022 are obsessed with UFOs, right? You don't really want that to happen. You definitely don't want to go down in a populated area, and that's where they seem to be heading. The idea of potentially crash landing in Los Angeles, one of the most heavily populated cities in the world. Rios asks if they have a better idea, to which Picard does, and they enter into the atmosphere. An interesting thing here, is that a potential goof? Graphic user interface. That looks Borgy to me. That looks Borgy. Perhaps it is... Perhaps this is the 8% of the Borg Queen that's still online. She's still kind of got an influence. But if that's the case... maybe a couple of green buttons here would not go amiss. That's what I have to say about that anyway. But Picard knows where to crash the ship, and they change course. A couple of other things here as well. Rios basically requests power. He orders power be transferred to blast shields, and I'm assuming to inertial dampers and things like that, because, well, they're going to crash, so they need to make sure that they're going to be okay. Raffi is also calling up. She needs more power to sickbay, and the reason why they're going down is because there's a massive power drain on the ship. The Borg Queen is siphoning off power. She's offline. She is apparently critically injured or critically drained of power to the point where she's in danger. So she's siphoning off power at the expense of Elnor and the biobed, which is pretty much the only thing that is keeping... It's the only thing that's keeping Elnor alive at this point. And now we see kind of more of this Borgified console. Picard is putting in some geographic coordinates, and yeah, we enter into the Earth's atmosphere, very, very quickly enter the Earth's atmosphere, and then before we know it, we're crashing into Le Bar, France. That's Chateau Picard right there. So some interesting things here. I do find it somewhat odd that I don't think they were able to get any power towards the forward blast shields. And if power had been pretty much wiped out and drained, I mean, I'm surprised that no one was flung from their seats and chucked around the place. I know I wouldn't get Sir Patrick Stewart to chuck himself around, because he's old and he can't do that. But, you know, if we would have seen some more explosions and some more violent kind of impacts of having crashed into the planet's surface, probably gone for a few trees there. We can see that there's quite a lot of shrubbery that's been thrown up. Doesn't look like the nicest landing. I mean, this kind of reminds me quite a lot of what the Enterprise D sees when it's crashing onto Viridian 3 in Generations. Not the ideal place to crash, but it crashes, but no one's thrust from their seats, no one's flung around the place. The ship's pretty much remarkably intact, so that's lucky, I guess. But another thing as well is, I mean, this must have been quite an explosion, quite a crash. Now, it's possible that Chateau Picard is not populated at this point in time. I would say it probably is. I would have expected at least one or two lights to maybe come on, maybe someone to walk outside and go, what's that that's going on? And then what they see is they see a ship. Now, to my understanding, the La Sirena does not have a cloaking device, although I'm sure they'll probably come up with some sort of way to hide them, unless Rios is going to get out there and just throw a load of trees onto the ship. I don't know. It just kind of seems weird, and unless the season takes place over the course of the next 24 hours, they're going to be seen. And this violent crashing into the surface must have woken up some people. But alas, it didn't. Anyway, one problem solved. Another one still very much happening down in what the La Sirena calls sickbay. And some reassuring words. Raffi's obviously really worried, and kind of Elnor seems to be trying to tell jokes and make good of it. He's not in a good way though. Back up on the main deck, what we have is we basically have confirmation that the Time Warp has drained the Queen of power. So Jurati is scanning the Queen. They come to the realization, and they're up against it. They need that biobed power. They don't have the power at the moment, and Rios proposes shooting the Queen. Well, first of all, the plan is to uncouple the Queen to prevent any further time or energy drainage. So here's what they're doing. They're trying to essentially uncouple her, and then Rios basically goes, well, we haven't got time for this. We're going to have to shoot her. And at this point, I'm just kind of shouting at the TV. I'm like, no. She's the only thing that can get you back. You need the Queen to get back. And I know in First Contact they recreated the vortex and things like that, but this is a very different mode of time travel. They need those calculations. I mean, Seven could do it, but this isn't the Seven that we know. She's not Borgified. So they need the Queen. They need the Queen to get home. But Rios is like, no, we're going to shoot the Queen. And Picard, rightly so, says, no, we need the Queen, you idiot. Don't shoot her in the head. And it's a rough dilemma. Of course, I'll give you that. Because their friend, Elnor, he's in deep trouble. Elnor asks Raffi to take a medallion that he received from the Quad Milat nuns. It's in his pocket, and it has a Romulan inscription, Sem Nak Kon, which Elnor translates as "Now is the only moment." So, kind of reminiscent of some words that Laris said to Picard in the first episode. But do you know what this actually reminds me of more than that? Now is the only moment. It reminds me of what Picard says to his daughter, Maribor. Kamen says to Maribor in the episode The Inner Light. He says, seize, I'm paraphrasing here, seize now, make now the only moment. So, very, very similar to the things that Kamen says, or Picard says to his daughter in that life that he led. So, kind of cool there. But while Raffi is reading this lovely medallion here, she turns around and Elnor has passed. It's a shocking scene. I was stunned when this happened. I was just, is he just looking at her? But no, he's dead. He has died, and this knocks Raffi. Of course it would. They'd obviously grown close in the moments following Picard season 1. They were teaming up at the academy, and they were serving together on the Excelsior. So this must have hit her very, very hard. And we find out that it hits her very hard. But Elnor has passed, and it's up to Raffi to put him in a body bag and to close the zip up. It's a traumatic moment. It's a horrible moment for the crew of the La Sirena. Picard, ever the professional, says the line, if we fail here, we fail Elnor. And therefore he knows that it's against every impulse that they feel inside, but they have to press on. They have to mend the timeline. Raffi seeks consolation from Seven. And Seven then turns around and says that Picard should have killed the Queen. Which, again, I'm just kind of confused at this, because Seven being far more obviously Picard assimilated by the Borg, but Seven was raised by the Borg. If there's anyone in the room that knows more about the Borg, it's her. She knows more about the Borg than anybody else in that room. And to say that Picard should have killed the Queen just doesn't make sense to me, because we know that they need the Queen to get back. They need the Queen to get back. And Raffi's despair turns to anger. And Raffi, she's incredulous. Picard says that they need to get the Queen back online because they need the Queen to work out, to determine where the Watcher is and to understand where the temporal displacement happens. Where does the timeline diverge? And Raffi, like I said, Raffi's sadness, Raffi's despair turns to pure anger, and she tells Picard that she feels, in her words, an intense, sharp disappointment in leadership because they're putting the Queen over Elnor. And from here, she goes, I mean, it's the angriest face I've ever seen. And Raffi's quite an angry person. But she's covered in Romulan blood. I mean, it's kind of... You can kind of see why she's angry, but the anger is blinding her to the operational truths of the mission. And that sounds like a very cold thing to say, but they're in Starfleet. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. And Picard knows that. And Raffi should know that. She's a commander in Starfleet, a reinstated commander in Starfleet. And from here, it gets even more weirder because Raffi starts talking about how Q and Picard and how this is all Q's fault and kind of blaming Picard as well, how because Picard and Q have played games with time, they screw around with people's lives for sport. And Picard very rightly... And it's something that I did appreciate here because I imagine in season 1 he probably would have just said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and that would have been it. But no, he stands up for himself because Raffi, as sad as she is kind of in the wrong here. It's not Picard's fault. It's Q's fault. Q's the one that's moved them in time and moved them into this alternate reality. I really, really did not like Raffi's attitude, motivations, the things that she says. Now, in real world situations, you know, if I lose someone in my family, touch wood, it doesn't happen. If you lose someone, you're upset, you're angry, you're looking for things to blame, you're looking for reasons as to explain why things happen in life. I get that, I totally get that, but these are not ordinary people. These are trained, qualified, tenured Starfleet professionals. These people are supposed to be the people that we are looking at and we are aspiring to be. These are the people who represent a future of humanity where we don't argue on Twitter every 5 seconds. Raffi is a human from the year 2022. She is angry to the point of red hot, white hot, blinding rage that she just can't see and think rationally, and she's just going to lash out at Picard. And it was so weird. And, you know, given everything that they've done with Raffi in season 1, the first 2 episodes of this, back in Starfleet's good graces, back in the swing of things, reinstated, given a purpose in life again. She seemed happy, and you know, this is a traumatic moment, but she's just reverted immediately back to that destitute Raffi that we see in the first season when we first meet her, and it was jarring. This was season 1 Raffi. But I did appreciate that Picard said, "This isn't me, this is Q, don't blame me, this is Q." And reinforces, essentially, reminds people, the Queen mentions that there's a Watcher waiting for them in Los Angeles, and this Watcher can, to their understanding, help them restore the timeline. Basically the conversation then turns to, well, if we fix this, is the timeline going to be fixed? No one knows for sure, but Raffi is hoping that, well, she's desperate now. She's desperate to get Elnor back, and she asks things like, you know, if we fix time, is this going to bring Elnor back? And I mean, the first thing that I'm thinking is, well, no, because he's zipped up in a body bag, and maybe I'm just looking at this from, like, Avengers Endgame style time travel, and at the end of the day, it is sci-fi time travel. But in this scene, in this moment, knowing kind of what we know, what we've seen in the past about time travel, no, because they're probably not in a temporal causality loop, they're just in a different timeline, and it happens that Elnor has moved with them into that timeline. He's dead, he can't be brought back. However, there is hope, I guess, in the fact that it only takes one snap of a finger by Q to undo all this, and that's what I think is going to happen here, and that kind of makes me a little bit sad. And I'm not like wishing death on anyone, but I think that Elnor's death in this scene was very poignant and quite shocking and very upsetting. And while I think Raffi's anger was misplaced, and I also think that Michelle Hurd kind of over-egged the acting a little bit. It was a bit overcooked, what I perceived it to be anyway. But you would understand that she would be upset, completely distressed, and just looking for any way to change things and to get out of this situation. So that desperation is completely understandable. Pleading with the universe to undo the death of someone that she cared about. Now, maybe I'm being a little bit cold about this, but I really think that Raffi was just over the top here. And we've seen it in Star Trek when people lose people that they care about deeply. And there's precedents in the Star Trek franchise. The best example that I can think about, and it's one that Picard Season 2 has already borrowed from the movie The Search for Spock. When, spoilers by the way, even though the film's like ancient, but spoilers, but when the Klingons kill Kirk's son, admittedly Kirk had only known of David's existence for a few months, but that's his flesh and blood, and he's been killed, and what does he do? He falls out of his chair. He's devastated, and he says, "Klingon bastards, you've killed my son." And he's upset. He's devastated by the death of his son, his actual flesh and blood son. Devastated. But he doesn't turn around to McCoy and blame McCoy for having Spock implant his capture in his mind. He doesn't berate McCoy for any of this. And when they get to Vulcan, when they get to the steps of Mount Soleo, and they get to the peak, and Sarek comes up to him and thanks him for everything that he's done and everything that he's sacrificed, his ship and his son and his safety. And Kirk doesn't berate him then and go, "Bitch, you made me lose my son." No, he says, "These were things that had to be done." I appreciate it's a different situation, and I appreciate it's a very different time, but that's what you would expect from someone Starfleet trained, a senior member of Starfleet. Not this petulance. I didn't like it. Let's move on. Anyway, so they basically, Raffi's like, if we change time, will it bring Elnor back? She doesn't know. None of these people know. So all they can do is they need to go and find the Watcher. They need to beam themselves into Los Angeles. They need to begin the mission. But what they also need to do is they need to fix the ship, right? They need to get the ship back in one piece so they can, once they've successfully found the Watcher, repaired the timeline, they can get the hell out of there and they can get back home. So that means that two people, Picard and Jurati basically say that they're going to stay behind and they're going to see if they can restore the Queen so that, also crucially, they can get the information about the whereabouts of the Watcher and also understand exactly what the action is that causes the temporal divergence. And yeah, that's pretty much that scene. I mean, we do also see there's a line where Picard does say it himself that he can see that Raffi is too emotionally invested, emotionally compromised. So Seven is going to go with Raffi, so we've got that pretty much sorted. Rios then mentions basically that he's going to go as well, and Jurati's like, well, leave your phaser here, and then stresses to the crew the importance of not disrupting the timeline. And she basically says, just be careful about butterflies. And it's a cool line, because the butterfly effect, if you've seen the film The Butterfly Effect, or the theory of the butterfly effect, that the smallest change can have absolutely massive implications on the timeline. Obviously that's going to rear its head, but basically get changed, change your clothes, be as blend in as much as possible, assimilate into Los Angeles 2024 culture and look. So, don't take your phasers, don't do anything that will get you scanned, don't get hit by anything, don't go to hospital, because the chips and things that they have could potentially be recognised as well. So, yeah, really, really important there that they don't do that. Rios and Picard, they go over the plan once again, which is basically find the Watcher, fix time, go back, fix the Queen, and hope that this all just blows over. And that's pretty much it, really. So, yeah, that'll do it for this scene. So that's thoughts on this scene. So, I think I've pretty much made my thoughts quite plain as to how I feel about Raffi's attitude and behaviour. So I don't really see the need to talk about that much anymore. But the scene itself, it's a good kind of conference scene in the respect that they're essentially trying to work out, what are they going to do in Los Angeles? How are they going to fix things? How are they going to achieve their aims? So it's a good kind of organisational scene. Again, in terms of the flow of the scene, the pacing of the scene, how it all kind of comes together, it's nice, it's quick, it's in, it's out, and it does exactly kind of what it needs to do. It sows some... It kind of plants some seeds for things that we're going to see later on that are obviously going to be very important. The whole butterfly thing, don't disrupt the past, massive implications if you do. Jurati and Picard are going to stay on board and they're going to try and fix the Queen and get the information that they need. And Seven is going to accompany Raffi, who is obviously, needs some help in a very difficult time for her. So, all in all, in terms of the structure and the pacing, a good scene. But in terms of the things that I didn't like, I think I pretty much made my feelings quite plain there. In terms of how I would have done it differently, because I don't want to be a person that just criticises and doesn't do it, without an idea on. I'm going to try and do it as constructively as possible. So Raffi can be upset. Raffi can be... Of course, Raffi's going to be upset. Raffi can be angry. We know that Raffi is a passionate, a fiery woman who doesn't suffer fools gladly. And if you love the character, that's probably a big reason as to why you love Raffi, right? Makes sense. So I would have had her just be more angry at the situation and angry and confused at why Q has done this. Why has Q... I've lost my surrogate son because of this bastard, and this better be worth it. And she could sit down. She goes, "This needs to work." So you could see her frustration and anger be manifested in a positive way instead. Instead of just having a go at Picard or having a go. I mean, Q. Be angry at Q. Q's done some weird things. But to kind of insinuate that Picard's been joining Q, playing games with lies and things like that. I mean, the first time... Q's done things like these before, but the thing that really sticks in my mind is the time where Q introduces the Federation, the Starfleet, to the Borg. And we saw nearly 20 crew members were killed when the Borg extracted a part of the Enterprise's hull. So Q's beyond our comprehension of thought. He's omnipotent. He doesn't view life in the same way as we do. Although you'd like to think that perhaps over the course of his adventures with Picard, that might have changed. But clearly not here anyway. But I would have preferred to have seen the anger be placed in a, well, I agree with you, Picard. This is... Elnor's death can't be in vain. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that we go and do... We go and we achieve the mission. We do what we need to do for Elnor. So it becomes less of a angry confrontation argument and more of a for Elnor kind of scene. That's what I would have done. Anyway, let's quickly before we go back. Let's go into the chat because I've been neglecting some of you. I do apologise. Let's see what's going on here. Hello to Trek Reviewer. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining. Justin, hello Justin. Seven's Borg implant disappeared from her eye and appeared on... Okay, cool. What else have we got? they can't blame the Borg Queen either for their situation. Yes, but I can kind of accept that they would manifest their anger and aim it at the antagonist in the room. And the Borg Queen in the timeline that we know has caused so much devastation. She is a physical manifestation of the Borg. She is evil incarnate, and that makes more sense. But their kind of repeated attempts to shoot her in the head and kill her doesn't make any sense, because they need her not only to get home, but they need her for the location of the Watcher, and they need her for that temporal divergence information. It's so important. Very important. Poor Elnor. Do they play bagpipes for a space ninja funeral? I hope so. I hope so. Interesting who the Watcher will be. Well, yeah, I don't want to speculate, because I think it could be anyone. What do you know what they're speculating? Go on, let's speculate, alright? So in the trailer, we see Laris with the bright white eyes. I have no idea how Laris could be in 2024, unless she's time travelled as well. Or it could be that Q's just snapped her in. That's also entirely possible. We do see in some trailers that have already dropped that the Watcher might take multiple forms, or the Watcher might be a group of people. Actually, it might just be an alien race that, like the Queen, can kind of see multiple timelines. Maybe that's something that could happen. But I think that the Watcher will assume the form of Laris, and that obviously gets Orla Brady in the show for the next few episodes. In terms of how Issa Briones fits into all this, how Soji gets involved, I have a theory that I think that she's going to be Adam Soon's daughter, and not related to Soji at all. So it's just going to be one of those kind of, you're just going to kind of have to accept that all Soongs over the generations just look exactly like the actors. I mean, we can kind of accept this. This is not exactly new, right? In TNG, Data's ancestors have all looked exactly like Data, and it doesn't really make any sense, but it's fine. It's fine. So I reckon that Issa Briones is going to be Adam Soong's daughter. Now, my initial thought was actually that Adam Soong, and I mentioned this last week, I thought that Adam Soong was going to be like this kind of basement-dwelling, angry, alt-right incel. I don't think that's the case now, and we will get onto that. And I've got a theory. So, all right, let's go back. Let's go back to the scene here. So, right, what have we got? What have we got? Okay, so yeah, so Jurati is waving. Jurati's waving what appears to be a medical tricorder instrument over the Borg Queen. She's obviously doing a neurological scan, which is that's a medical procedure, right? Although, I mean, I guess you could say, I mean, Jurati being a cyberneticist, this is perhaps just a thing that you wave over a robot, maybe? I don't know. But it's interesting, because earlier on in the episode, Raffi was like, well, there's no medical tricorders. Surely Raffi could have gone, I've got one, here you go. I don't know if this is going to help or not, but it looks like she has one. Anyway, they're scanning the Borg Queen to try and get an understanding of what's going on. What's going on in her noggin? And oh dear, lost my screen. I lost my screen. No. I knew that we were going to get some sort of. I knew that we were going to get some sort of temporal anomaly come and hijack the conversation at some point. Let's see if I can get a screen back up and running. Here we go. There we go. We're back up and running. So Jurati is scanning the Queen, and she is. What is she doing here? So she runs a scan of the Queen. She concludes the Borg Queen is in there somewhere. So the Borg Queen's neurological patterns, they're still there. And the Borg Queen is essentially still trying to talk, still trying to communicate. Obviously, we can only assume to help the crew find out where the Watcher is, and to help the crew, basically. So Jurati proposes connecting to the Queen's subconscious, essentially allowing herself to be mentally assimilated. Picard mentions that he has... Obviously, he would be able to connect and integrate with the Queen, but the Queen would be able to take him over in seconds because of his history with the Collective. The thing here, though, the question that I have, and it's already been established again in the first episode of Picard, is that, well, Picard's a robot now. There's no Borg stuff in Picard's mind. There's no stuff that... It's not even his brain anymore. It's a robot. He's a robot now. He's Iron Man Picard. So Picard should surely be able to integrate with the Borg. That seems to have been forgotten about, and it's really frustrating because in episode 1, they do all these kind of cool nuanced things where Picard's kind of like, I can't sense it's the Borg anymore, so he looks at Seven, and Seven goes, yes, that's the Borg. And so we get all that kind of stuff, we get the nods and the winks, and as far as we know, Picard is still positronic. So, and let's say because they move into this alternate timeline, right, and Picard is inhabiting his Confederation doppelganger. Christ, the brain swells just thinking about this. Well, he was not assimilated by the... Maybe he was assimilated by the Borg in this timeline. Who knows? But it seems to me that he was more of a conqueror than a victim of the Borg in this timeline. So it stands to reason that Picard was never assimilated, but Picard doesn't have any of this Borg tech. And even if that's not the case, even if it's still Robo-Picard, he's Robot Picard. So... It just seemed to me like a way to get Jurati to connect with the Borg. Picard initially, he's not happy with this at all. He doesn't want Jurati to risk herself to connect to someone so dangerous, but pretty much concedes though that they are essentially out of options. They don't really have a choice. They have to interface with the Queen because they need the information in the center of her brain. Super important. Picard doesn't want to do it. Perhaps he doesn't know if he, perhaps he can't feel himself. Perhaps he doesn't know if he is Robo Picard or if he was assimilated or not in this timeline. So that's possible, and he doesn't want to risk it. But he also doesn't want to risk Jurati. Something has to give. Picard doesn't want it to happen, but Picard ultimately puts his foot down and he says, "No. I'm not going to let you assimilate. I'm not going to let the Queen assimilate your mind." On the bridge, so Seven has rerouted some power from life support to the transporters, and we get a fun line from Rios where he says the systems are sub-computational, which in Earth speak is basically for shit, which I laughed at. In certain scenes, certain sequences, if you're going to drop a little swear in there, that's kind of where you do it. And I kind of liked it. Raffi is obviously still very upset over the fact that they've rerouted some power, and she said that we could have used that power for Elnor. They could have used that power sooner. And these guys are just like... Anyway, and they just carry on the conversation. As it turns out, though, that Raffi does have some interesting information. She did a little bit of research, did some digging before, and points out that what they need to do is they need to get to the highest point in Los Angeles so they can scan for the Watcher that they don't really know where they are yet, but I think the theory is that they're going to be looking for some alien tech. So she points out that they can transport over to the Markridge Industrial Tower, which is the tallest building in Los Angeles at that time, and they're going to use that place to scan for alien activity. And then Raffi just storms off, because that's what Raffi does. They go and they look for some clothes, and they put on a load of clothes, and Rios asks Seven if he still looks like a fascist bastard, and she agrees that he no longer looks fascist. So it's a tidy little line. I do have to say that this coat is remarkably stylish for a Confederation outfit, Confederation uniform. How convenient. And this jacket, the jacket that Seven also puts on, it looks like it's a passable jacket. And thank goodness this ship came with an outfit that was in 7 size. How convenient. This cool little moment though, where she sees that the Confederation Starfleet symbology includes Borg's skull, and she rips that shit off. She's not putting that on. And there's a nice quiet moment where once again she reflects on the fact that there is no visible Borg implants, and she's been transformed, and the body that she's in now is one that is free of Borg implants, and she looks quote unquote normal. And it's an interesting moment, and it's one that could lend itself to some interesting developments. Could it be that Seven doesn't want things to change? Maybe that she's presented with an opportunity to live life as a quote unquote normal human being for the first time in her life, and perhaps that's something that corrupts her and corrupts her on the mission. I don't think it would, but I see it as an interesting thing, and maybe just as a reminder, as a bit of an in-joke to the audience, is that she's not going to have to put any plasters on her face or put a ripped piece of Vulcan dressing gown over the top of her head to kind of blend in. She's going to be able to blend in far easier than she ever has been before. So an interesting moment. Be interesting to see where it goes, basically. Raffi then enters and hands Seven a comm badge, so they've got comm badges that can beam them back. And it's a quick scene, and Seven basically asks Raffi if she wants to talk about it, and Raffi basically says no, she wants to focus on fixing the timeline than talk about how she felt to watch Elnor die. And do you know what? This is one scene later, the course correction that we wanted, and also, as you can see there, she's wearing Elnor's medallion already. So her anger, she's going through the stages of grief, and she's moved to this point of, now I'm determined, and there's no point in being angry at people. I'm going to take my energy and my anger, and I'm going to use it for good. I'm going to take that anger and I'm going to turn it into positive anger. We catch up again with Jurati and Picard, and Jurati is basically, Picard's just kind of like, well, we haven't really got a choice here. I'm going to have to hook one of us up to the Borg Queen to get the information that we need. Jurati comes in again, and she basically tries to convince Picard. She says that it's only going to be a partial assimilation, and Picard turns around and he says this line. He says, halfway to hell is still not a recommended destination. I didn't like that line, because he says the next line he says is, it's incredibly dangerous. It's still incredibly dangerous. And it's just kind of like, why didn't you just say that? And I just imagine the writer just wrote, halfway to hell is still not a recommended destination. It's just like, it sounds cool, but I just don't think it's something that someone would say in that moment. So he just turn around and just say, partial or not, it's still dangerous. There are still risks. I know. I've been assimilated. You haven't. But instead we kind of get a bit of a grandstanding line, and it just took me out of it. I just didn't like it. So, but Jurati kind of maintains, she's just kind of like, look, it's subconscious, things are going to be kept separate, Jurati's still going to be herself, Picard can monitor progress, and once she's reached 100%, she can be disconnected. Picard then warns, though, that the Queen, so if Jurati can access the Queen can interact and access Jurati as well. So it's very dangerous. Jurati then jokes about, I'm silent with cats, and we move into the next scene. The next scene is pretty much, we're getting going with this mission. We're about halfway through the episode, and we're kind of getting going. But it's not been a slow first half. It's been super fast paced, and that's been nice so far. So Seven, Raffi and Rios, they're going to beam to LA. They're going to begin the mission while Picard and Jurati get the information that they need from the Queen. Jurati says that they are going to try to put them as close to the tower as possible. I don't know how she is going to do that, because she says that, and then Rios is the one that engages the transporter beam anyway. So I don't know, unless she'd already put the calculations in place. I don't know, that's the explanation there. They beam aboard, and Jurati and Picard are left to do this very dangerous mission to access the Borg Queen to get the information that they need. So Picard takes what appears to be a Borg tubule that looks very different to the Borg tech that we've seen before, but that was to be expected. We kind of knew that was going to happen anyway. And Jurati says, don't worry, I'll be fine, or something to that extent. And as soon as he attaches this assimilation tube, she just goes completely comatose. And that was handled really quite well, because she's mid-sentence. As soon as he attaches it, dead silence, the face goes blank, and it was really well handled. I really quite liked that. An interesting thing that I noted here as well is this tubule it's not like it doesn't appear to be invasive. It's almost like a magnet. But what it looked like to me, and how he pressed this into her neck, and the way it just kind of like clung there, is it kind of looked to me like a leech, like a leech would latch onto the skin. So that's what I kind of took from that. So the Borg, as we saw in First Contact, were designed to kind of look like locusts. The people had been assimilated from the inside out. Very, very disgusting. But here I'm getting a different kind of vibe. I'm getting a different life form. I'm getting leech. So it's a bit of a retcon. We kind of knew that, but it's still kind of cool. It's very different. And they basically have to sit there and wait while Jurati interacts with the Queen to get the information that they need. And Picard is looking at what I understand is the equivalent of a tricorder. I do want to quickly point out as well that this is a Galaxy Z Fold. So this is a Z Fold. These are these kind of nifty phones that fold in the middle, and they've just got a futuristic snap case over the top. Work with what you got. I would say, though, that if you go back and you watch Nemesis, and I watched Nemesis recently, the tricorders in Nemesis are tiny. They're really thin tricorders. So there's been a tech regression. That's all I'm saying. They sit there, and we get some music play over the top, and it's California Dreaming. And I can't remember, who did California Dreaming first? I'm going to type it up and I'm going to find it's the Mama and Papas. Yeah, of course it is. So I can only assume the Picard production couldn't afford Mama and Papas, maybe. So they got some German EDM to play over some very crisp, nice shots of LA. And they're nice. They're very not Star Trek. They remind me of establishing shots that you would see in Voyager's Future Past? Is it Future Past? I think it's Future Past. And there are some locations, synonymous with LA. I'll be honest, some of these shots actually reminded me quite a lot of like GTA. When you see a GTA trailer, you get the fairground, you get the palms, you get the laboratory, and then you get more palms and residential areas, the highway, and that reminds me a lot of kind of what you would see in GTA, which is, if you're in, is it Los Santos? I don't know, I've not played that game in ages, but I think that's modelled after LA anyway, so it's kind of cool. It is what it is. It's to establish this modern timeline. It doesn't look like things have changed much in the 2 years, which you would expect. And Raffi materialises, luckily with nobody nearby. But there does appear to be... She doesn't look like she's in a particularly wonderful area of the neighbourhood. A cool thing, probably not intentional, but this whole shot with the litter and the truck is a very different effect, but it reminded me of Terminator 2 when Arnold Schwarzenegger materialises underneath a truck. That's just what I took from it. And she looks around, she's like, well, this is a shithole, isn't it? We get Seven, she materialises out of nowhere, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, well, someone's surely going to have to see her, right? Someone, what are the odds that 3 people are able to just kind of beam in the middle of day in Los Angeles and go completely undetected? But yeah, she's seen by a girl, and the girl's like, are you a superhero? I don't know how old this girl is. 6, 7, 8? I don't know. It's hard to judge with kid ages. I've got a son. He's 8 months old, so I'm still a way off being able to know this. But let's say she's 8. If I was an 8-year-old and I saw someone beam in like that, I'd be like, what the hell is going on? I'd run away. But no, it's fine. She goes, are you a superhero? And 7 9's like, can you keep a secret? And of course the girl's like, yay! And Seven just walks off. And I hope that this girl can't keep a secret, and that I hope that the transporting into Los Angeles in the middle of the day is going to have some sort of repercussion. I hope she kind of runs off and she's like, Mummy, Daddy, someone just appeared out of thin air. And well, maybe the parents would probably just go, that's sweet, dear. And that's the end of it. But here, so we still got this EDM music that's playing, this EDM monstrosity. And this is potentially a deep cut. So Rios materializes in midair, and it's a bit slapstick. He hits this balcony, and flips over and thuds into the floor. Very painful, and the way the music cuts as well is so. It's a really cool kind of cut. It's kind of played for laughs. It's kind of funny. But in terms of materialising in the middle of the air, so I mentioned how Raffi materialising kind of reminded me of Terminator 2. Well, and this was a deleted scene in the first Terminator movie. So Kyle Reese, in the original version that we were going to get, it was actually Kyle Reese and somebody else. And that person actually materialised in a very similar way. They materialised in a wall, in like a... I don't know what they call these, like a stairwell. Materialised in that, and there was nothing to be done for them, and Kyle Reese just had to get on with it. Michael Biehn had to then kind of run and just get on with things. So, kind of cool there. I don't know if that was the intent to kind of riff on that. But yeah, Rios, it's a rough landing. And the music stops dead. An interesting thing here as well, I know that this Tipton is some sort of reference to some Star Trek comic book writers, but another cool thing here as well is that this deli was established in, 1966, which is of course the official birth year of Star Trek. Yay! So I did laugh at this scene initially, and then when we kind of see that Raffi, I keep saying Raffi, got her on the mind. We see that Rios is, well, he's seriously injured. He's not in a good way. So the laugh kind of abruptly stops there. he's hurt. And so that pretty much ends that sequence. And we go into this surgery, this emergency theatre. And Rios is being brought in by a good Samaritan. And Rios is saying things like, don't tell him, don't call the police, don't take me to a hospital, these kind of things, echoing, playing up what Jurati had basically said, that anything that they do could have severe consequences. He's fortunately been taken to, this Good Samaritan, recognising some of the things that he's been saying, and recognising them obviously as something very, very different, and we'll get on to that, has taken him to this surgery in particular, and he needs a bit of help. Problem is, though, is Rios has dropped something, and yes, that is his bloody communicator. Not good, Rios, not good. Did you learn any lessons from Lieutenant Reed? Did you not learn anything from Malcolm in the communicator, that old episode of Enterprise? Don't leave stuff lying around. Not good. We go to the next scene, and Raffi is walking through somewhere. We don't know where it is, or do we? We see that she's walking around the Sanctuary District. Uh-oh. Obviously, this isn't the same Sanctuary District, because they are in LA. They're not in San Francisco, where Ben Sisko and Dr. Bashir are, potentially even at the same time. I will say here, I was kind of scanning the skyline, hoping for some sort of Easter egg for Chronoworks from Future Past. I think that's the name of the episode anyway. But I couldn't see anything, and I'm assuming that the company probably went bust. But imagine, though, with all of that technology and all of what they had been able to take from the alien technology or the future technology and to benefit society, that someone would have taken it over, a la Tim Cook. after Steve Jobs. So I was kind of hoping that ChronoWorks would still be a thing. It would have been a cool kind of Easter egg, but alas, we didn't get any of that. But Raffi is in the sanctuary, and here we see a poster or a billboard for the Europa mission. To boldly go, nice little callback. The new interplanetary explorers. I will come back to that in a second, because I think that is going to be very, very important. So Raffi's walking around, and all of a sudden, very suddenly, very predictably, someone tries to mug her, basically. But this is Raffi, and Raffi, not only is she filled with rage over the death of Elnor, she's a tough son of a gun. She takes him out super easily. This guy didn't have a chance. But an interesting thing that she does here is she takes the wallet out and she mugs him. She takes his money. Fair enough. I mean, if you're going to go after the queen, you better not miss. And but then Seven is kind of like, well, it's getting down with the locals and things like that. Do we not have more pressing things to do? You shouldn't be mugging people, basically. But Raffi says something that's very interesting, and again, it kind of contradicts the things that were established with her character in season 1, because she's living destitute. She's not got things, and it's kind of hinted at that currency is still a thing in the future, but then they've kind of just gone back on it, and she's kind of like, oh yeah, money, right, oh yeah. I mean, what is it? What is it, guys? Is there money? Is there no money? If there's no money and they're living in a post-scarcity society, she shouldn't be destitute. She shouldn't. So it's again another confusing thing. Anyway, they've got eyes on the prize, and they're talking about essentially getting up to the tower and sorting out all this kind of stuff. And she basically kind of asked the questions like how a society with so many contradictions didn't collapse sooner. And she also notes that Seven looks kind of relaxed about the whole situation, and Seven doesn't answer. That's kind of interesting. She basically said that they need to find Rios, and she'd basically been able to track Raffi via the combats, but not been able to find Rios. And Raffi basically says, well, let's just carry on. I'm sure Rios is on his way, and they don't plan on wait for Picard to wake, quote unquote, Her Highness, basically. So they're going to carry on with the mission, and Rios is on his own. So back on the La Serena, Picard is obviously worried about Jurati, trying to make sure that she's okay, and there's a very interesting conversation that starts happening here, where Jurati starts talking very childlike. She's kind of commenting on warm feelings and how she wanted to disobey Picard, or disobey him. It's not known if it's actually Picard or not, but we assume that it is. Disobey him out of spite, not only because she wishes, but only because she wishes he was her father. Picard is amused, and he says, well, we're diving into the deep end here. The Queen is making her way through Jurati's mind, but Picard is encouraging Jurati, basically saying that she can push back, she can get the information that she needs as well. But the Queen is basically taking Jurati on a tour of her own mind, and they go through a number of rooms. They go into the control center for humor, and which Jurati kind of says is a defense mechanism. They go into anger, where Jurati basically calls Picard a pretentious prick, and then we go to fear and to sadness, and sadness is where it gets a little bit dark, it gets a little bit heavy. Picard looks down, he sees that the neural network is 77%, nearly 80%, so nearly at the point where they can unplug her. And Jurati says that she's starting to feel like she's losing control of herself, and the Queen's no longer just observing. And then she starts speaking with the Queen's voice as well, which I kind of found a bit weird, because I mean, unless through this assimilation, because it's mentioned that this is like a partial mental assimilation, not a physical one. So when Jurati starts speaking in this robotic, modulated voice, how is she doing that? How is she speaking like a robot if she doesn't have any enhancements to her vocal cords? Maybe she does. I don't think she does, though. It's kind of weird. But anyway, she starts speaking with a Queen voice. She starts addressing Picard as Locutus, and remarking on how she'd not encountered someone with Jurati's sense of longing in a long time. And suddenly, the Queen starts speaking with Jurati's voice. So it's almost like there's a swapping of the minds and of the voices. It's very interesting. And but Picard's kind of worried. The Queen is starting to take over Jurati. This is starting to get dangerous, and he pulls the plug. And the Doctor goes unconscious, and the lights go out. So things are not looking good there at all. So are they going to be able? Are they going to be able to get the information that they need? I don't know. It's not looking good. So there we go. We're almost. Well, we're about about a third of the way through. Let's go back to some of the chat. Say hello. Okay. Balloonhead, hello. Hope you're doing well. Thank you very much for joining, even if it's only briefly. I would have blasted the Borg Queen. I mean, Seven evaporated her own husband. Yeah, but her own husband wasn't the one that was going to get them through time and back. So it's quite important, actually, that you probably don't disintegrate the person that can get you back in time to change the timeline and get you back. I think that would be a strategic mistake. Great Picard impression. Thank you. It's not bad, is it? It's rubbish, actually. It's just a posh British man voice that's usually quite rubbish. What have we got here? Think about it. If the Borg Queen really wanted to assimilate the crew, she could have assimilated Jurati while Jurati laid on the floor. The Borg Queen was already walking on two arms much earlier. Yep. When tech today feels like it should be in the 25th century, it's hard not to use it. No. Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, the technology that we see in Voyager and Enterprise and some other Trek productions is the technology that they use at the time. But if you think, I mean, we've seen in this time, not in this timeline, but we've seen in this point in time, the Nemesis era, and this is what 20, 30 years after Nemesis. They were using tiny micro tricorders, thin napkin tricorders. So I don't like it. I don't like it. It's a nitpick, yeah, I know. Had Chakotay succeeded in killing Seven, the Voyager crew would have not survived the Delta Quadrant. Yep. Yeah, talking Voyager. Alright, I'm going to go back to talking about Picard, because we are back. They've arrived at the building that they need to access to scan for the Watcher signs. Careful with that comm badge sticking out, Raffi. You don't want anyone to see that. You could get in trouble. And that's a tall building. Nope. Big nope for me. I absolutely hate heights. I'm not going up there. So they go up into this tower. I'm assuming they've pretty much reached the top. Or, I mean, Raffi seems to be pointing that they need to go some ways up, actually. Yeah, actually, it kind of looks like they're probably only maybe a third or halfway through, so it looks like they've still got some ways to go. And they are approached by a security guard. The security guard wants to know, this is restricted access, you can't go there, you can't go any further, you can't go up. And this security guard is basically, well, he takes his job very seriously. But Seven and Raffi, they put on a bit of an act here, and they basically say, Seven says that Raffi's her girlfriend and they're looking to take a picture, and they mention a colleague of the guards, who the guard identifies as Kevin. Seven goes on saying that Kevin let them up there on their first date for a picture. She then wanted to take another one because they just got engaged. So it's kind of like a throwback picture, a comparison picture, and the guard basically gives in because they use the tactic of, wow, you don't, you're more fun than Kevin, right? And the security guard kind of goes, he gives in, he's like, well, yeah, I am more fun than Kevin. So he lets them go, and Seven remarks that she's surprised because most strangers don't tend to like her. So that could be another callback to, again, the lack of the implant. So that could be an important part of her story in this season. I'm sure it's going to be touched upon again at some point. A cool little tidbit here. This guy, playing, I can't remember who the security guard's name is. I don't think he has a name. He's just playing a security guard. He's played by a chap called Matthew Kaminsky, who also appeared in Enterprise's second season, the episode Singularity and the Crossing. So he played Crewman Cunningham. So that's kind of cool, right? The 20 plus years after first appearing in Enterprise, appearing in Picard. Obviously not playing the same person. Or maybe this is security guard Cunningham and an ancestor of Crewman Cunningham. That would be kind of neat. Not that I, would really care, really, to be fair. So, right, here we go. So let's carry on. So they're basically remarking that, people like me here. What's going on? Why is... people don't like me before, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. We're heading back downtown, and this doctor is treating Rios for a suspected concussion. He also has what appears to be a serious hand injury, probably a dislocation. I believe it's a dislocation anyway. This doctor, these two have struck up quite a camaraderie already. There seems to be quite a bit of chemistry between the two of them, and this doctor begins to... she asks Rios to tell her a story, and Rios starts talking about his childhood, and obviously he's got to be very careful about the information that he divulges because he's in the past. And he starts talking about how when he was 8 years old at the academy he got into a simulator and broke records and things like that, and his mother was really, really proud. And before he can finish the story, the doctor just resets his hand, and it's a funny moment, and the way it's done as well, very similar to how he falls to the ground and onto the pavement. Just a very sudden kind of ow, and it's a good distraction technique. I imagine doctors probably do that. They probably get the patient to think about something else because this is going to hurt, but sets it, fixes it. That's all good. One other thing that I really want to point out here: butterfly. We'll talk about that again in a bit. We head back up to the tower. They've reached the top. Thank you, security guard Cunningham, and they're now scanning. And Seven remarks that maybe they're too late, or perhaps this is the beginning of the future. And we get a shot of some very uncomfortable fires, some wildfires that frequently hit LA and the California region, and wondering, has the future already begun? Are we already on this kind of path? And Raffi kind of remarks, it's interesting what she says, and I want to kind of bring up the things that she says, because... So Seven, looking at the Hollywood Hills, states that perhaps the change has already happened, and Raffi is adamant that it won't. Not yet. So the interesting thing here is she's kind of saying maybe this is too late, maybe this has already happened. But I mean, this is 400 years before. So yeah, I'm not going to look into that into too much detail. I mean, Picard, what they're trying to do in this season, they're I don't know how much of this they're going to be able to hit, but they're going to be talking about immigration, they're going to be talking about police brutality, they're going to be talking about marginalised cultures and societies, they're going to be talking about global warming, they're going to be talking about a lot of things, a lot of contemporary issues, and these are things that you can do when you go to a contemporary setting. The Voyage Home did it, back in 1986. So if anyone's complaining that Star Trek's being super preachy, it's like, well, I'm just going to go, well, they did this in 1986. The Voyage Home is essentially an awareness piece for the dangers of whaling and the dangers of hunting things and forcing extinction and things like that. So that has environmental messages as well. So it's not exactly like Star Trek has done it for the first time here. So I'm sure someone's going to moan about it anyway. But we have found a signal. They found a signal from somewhere near MacArthur Park. It was there and then it was gone. But Seven then detects Rios's comm badge, but it's kind of activating, deactivating. In her words, it's on the fritz. And Seven wonders if it's Morse code. It's not Morse code, though. It's this kid. just repeatedly pressing this button. He's just button mashing this comm badge. One thing that I do want to point out as well, and it's something that I talked about in the last episode, because we saw Elnor use one of these badges, we can assume it's one of these badges, to slit the throat of a security guard. And I speculated that in the brutal Confederation timeline, these comm badges kind of doubled as a knife, as a kind of shuriken, kind of throwing blade weapon. And this kid just has this knife, this knife in his hand, and he doesn't care. Surely he must be able to feel that that's quite sharp, but he's a young kid. Maybe he doesn't care. It's edgy, right? But he keeps hitting this comm badge, and Rios is like, "Hey, you! I need that. That's mine, and you're stealing." And this kid, he's a wise ass. He's a cool kid. He's basically kind of saying, like, what have you got to trade for it? And Rios is like, oh, I'm dealing with someone here. And the kid starts quoting logic. And Rios is like, oh, I'm being beaten by a kid here. Damn Vulcans and logic is kind of what he mutters under his breath. And luckily, there's a plate of cookies on top of the fridge in this place. Also, another butterfly. Interesting. And Rios notes that these cookies have actual peanut butter. He's loving it. I don't know here if Rios is just kind of doing this to make the kid want the cookie, or if he is genuinely delighted at the fact that he's eating real peanut butter again. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. But anyway, the kid is like, wait, cookies? Cookies? I want cookies. And yeah, it looks like the trade is about to happen. But the Doctor basically swings in, and through conversation it's revealed that the kid is her son, and the husband ran off a long time ago and left them and remarried, according to the kid. So, I mean, that sets up something, because there is chemistry between these two. These two are going to get it all before the end. Anyway, we find out the son's name is Ricardo. Give me that thing. And so the comm badge is put on the plate. So Rios still hasn't got the comm badge yet. And here is... I think this might be the first ever reference to something else. Another piece of pop culture in the Star Trek universe. I don't think we've ever had it before. So we get a Rick and Morty reference. The first thing that I thought was, what is this mum doing letting this clearly underage person watch Rick and Morty? Rick and Morty is not for kids. Rick and Morty is for adults. I'm not going to let my son watch Rick and Morty, not until he's at least 30 years old. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, definitely don't use Rick and Morty as a carrot to get your kid to do homework. That's not cool. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I like the fact that we got a Rick and Morty reference. I think it is the first time we get a reference to some sort of outside media property. And also the fact that we know that Mike McMahon, or Mike McMahon, however you want to pronounce it, was associated with Rick and Morty. Also the showrunner and creator of Lower Decks. So that kind of begs the question, right? Does that mean in this universe that Mike McMahon is writing Star Trek Lower Decks? Is there a Star Trek in this universe? My theory, obviously, I mean, it's super meta, and it's super cool, and it's a bit kind of snake will eat its own tail kind of logic here, is I would just assume that in this universe, Mike McMahon does exist, which is cool, but he's probably just writing something else. He's doing Star Mission Lower Decks or something like that. That's kind of how I've fixed it in my head. Not that I thought about it that much, but I just love the fact that Rick and Morty is canon, and I love the fact that by extension Mike McMahon is canon. That's awesome. Anyway, so we got the kid's cool, and look, there's another butterfly. The actual doctor practice that they're in, and I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not going to even attempt to read the name of it, but the English translation is the butterfly. So more of that butterfly stuff. So like a warning. Is that Q shenanigans maybe, or is that just galactic coincidence? Who knows? But yeah, these two, they're vibing, aren't they? And this nurse walks in. She's washed his clothes. How good of her. How good of her to do that. We head back to Le Bar, France. And, yeah, I mean, obviously the question that I've got at this point is still no lights. Still no kind of wondering what's going on here. No one? No one heard a crash. Okay. Jurati is still, she's still out of it, and the Queen has regained consciousness, and much to Picard's shock and alarm and concern. And here now the Queen is essentially revitalized, rejuvenated, and she's also at a point now where she's kind of got that mental clarity. She's speaking like the Queen usually speaks, so that's kind of cool. And it's the first time that we see this version of the Queen, Annie Wershing's Queen, kind of be that sultry, dangerous Borg Queen. So yeah, that's a concern. And it's in this scene where the Queen remarks that she's had a strange dream and that her little companion Jurati was in it. And the Borg, so Picard mentions that the Queen is far more lucid than before, and that she's got the clarity of vision that's been restored because it's taking place before the divergence. And Picard reminds her, he's like, well, tell us what you know about the Watcher. We need that information. And it's kind of weird now because the Queen, even though she's agreed to come back with them, she's kind of playing coy. She's keeping things close to herself. And, if he wanted access to the Borg Queen's innermost thoughts, that he would put something on the table, something that it would hurt him to lose. And she basically, what she's trying to do is she wants control of the ship, even though surely she should already have control of the ship, unless off-screen Rios kind of puts some sort of computer lockout in place. But the Queen has essentially partially assimilated the ship, right? The computer ship functions. She should already have the ship. But I don't know. She basically wants a ship, and she wants to add some voices because she's a bit lonely. She wants to break the silence. So, yeah, things are a little bit worrying there. But I'm just kind of some kind of confusing things, really. Why is the Queen all of a sudden now like, nah, I'm not going to be so helpful here, and I want the ship. She should already have the ship. But anyway, we're at a stalemate. We head back to the clinic. And we see this gentleman in a wheelchair. We get a better shot of this guy in a second, and there's a really cool connection to this guy in the Star Trek universe. And Rios he's getting dressed, and he's getting ready to kind of get out there. And the nurse is basically saying, "Look, he's got to go, or he's finished." So Rios basically comes in. He says, "Thanks for washing my clothes, and I'll just need my badge." And she's like, what badge? But I mean, she should know what it is, right? She literally had it a second ago. And he's kind of like gesturing. He's like, well, it kind of looks like the Delta. It looks like a Delta, right? And before they can carry that conversation over, the police pull up. The immigration police. I think they're called ICE in this. And there's obviously panic because it's clear that this clinic is designed for people who may not be in the country strictly legally. Rios goes to leave. He goes to take this gentleman with him, sticks him in a wheelchair. Now, okay, it's at this point, this is really cool. This guy's name is Marcelo Tubert, who he was in Star Trek 31 years ago. He appeared in the TNG 4th season episode Devil's Due. He was Accost Jared in that episode that had what's her name? The devil, not the actual devil, Ardra, their civilization knew her as Ardra, but obviously she was just a con woman. But yeah, that's the same guy. There we go. So a kind of a random connection, kind of out of nowhere. But Rios goes to get Accost Jared out of there. Maybe that's Jared's ancestor. No, it's probably not, is it? Anyway, we head back to the La Serena, and the editing's obviously getting a little bit shorter now because we are reaching the end of the episode, the crescendo. And the Queen wants the ship in exchange for the location of the walker. I still maintain that the Queen should have the ship, right? She already has access to the ship. She should have control of the ship, but apparently not. Maybe it's only a partial assimilation, but it seemed like she had more than her fair share of control. I mean, she took control of the ship to initiate the temporal anomaly, the slingshot maneuver. So it's kind of, I'm going to assume that Rios has just put some sort of computer lockout, a la Data in First Contact, to kind of act as a failsafe just in case. But I mean, Rios is no Data, so I'm assuming the encryption probably isn't that difficult. But Jurati regains consciousness, and the ship's back online. Picard tells her, as is the Queen. And then Picard basically says, same leopard, same spots. Obviously, treacherous Queen. But they think that they need the Queen. But Jurati says that she doesn't think that they need the Queen now. Doesn't need the Queen to be active. And the Queen's kind of like, bitch, please, you need me. You need me for the Watcher. And Jurati, she knows. She's like, no, I don't think so. Jurati asks the Queen exactly what information the Queen holds, and all of a sudden the Queen's kind of like, oh, oops. And Jurati says, computer, dictate a file labelled shit I stole from the Borg Queen, to which plays a set of coordinates for the location of the Watcher. So Jurati is also sure the exact moment of the divergence will come to her mind in time, to which the Queen is obviously, she's not that useful anymore. She's still going to be needed to get them back to the future, I can assume. Back to the Future, obviously with Lee Thompson. But she does say a very chilling line at the end, and the Queen basically says that she's done something more difficult and more vastly dangerous than she realised. Jurati's like, what's that? And the Borg Queen says that you have impressed me. Ooh. This is the last we see of the Borg Queen in this episode, and I have to say that it's an excellent performance by Annie Wershing, particularly as she kind of comes to, as she becomes more lucid, as Picard puts it. She was already the performance was pretty decent, very sinister throughout the episode, the way she's kind of positioned, the way she's kind of strung up, it's very kind of dangerous looking, looking like a threat always, and particularly when she comes through at the end, and the line delivery, "You've impressed me," is chilling to say the least. Anyway, we head back to the clinic, and Rios is wheeling Jared out there, but he realizes he's got to get that. He has to get that comm badge, otherwise, butterflies be damned. Everything's going to fall apart. The police kick down the door, and they're obviously police in LA. They're going to be charming officers, of course. And Jared asks. I'm just going to call him Jared, by the way. Jared asks Rios, are you coming? And Rios basically says, no, I'm going to try and help hold them back. And that he's worried for her. Oh, it's sweet. And that's kind of like the reaction of, oh, you charmer, you. Anyway, these police, they are asking all the standard questions. And we see here the Department of Homeland Security Police. So they are immigration police. And probably just asking all the kind of questions of, who have you got holed up here and what's going on. I do have to say, I didn't notice this before. This woman doesn't seem particularly bothered. She's kind of sat there. She's like, all right, she's just going to let it happen. The doctor is... She's arguing at this point, and then Rios comes in. He's disguised as a doctor, and she's like, what are you doing here? And I'm helping you. Here's the thing, though. They're speaking Spanish. Surely Homeland officers, immigration police, they're going to speak Spanish, right? Surely. These people probably speak Spanish, because one of these people are probably going to have to speak Spanish to communicate what's going on to some of the people that they're going to arrest. So they're just openly speaking, what are you still doing here? I'm helping you. I mean, there's not a lot to be taken from that. He's not saying, what are you still doing here? I'm helping you, and I'm also from the 25th century. So there's that. So maybe you can let it pass. But when he's saying, I'm kind of helping you, surely they'd pick up on that and they'd go, what did you say? What did you say? So basically, there's this whole kind of pretense of, I'm trying to rescue this boy. I'm trying to save this boy. go away, and you're obstructing me and you're preventing me from doing my job. One of the officers notices that he has a fairly recent injury, and that's pretty much the giveaway, really. The police have him up against the wall and arrest both of them, arrest the doctor as well for obstruction of justice or whatever, some sort of made up reason just to get her along. What the officer also says that what Rios was doing was either brave or stupid, but guessing that Rios had no ID or UHC card, which I'm assuming stands for Universal Health Card, but that was referenced for the first time in trying to remember past imperfect. Trying to remember the name of the episode, the Deep Space Nine past tense. That's it, past tense. Where so that's mentioned there for the first time. So kind of a cool little callback. And anyway, so the officers lead these two away, and things aren't looking good. And as they're being led away, I also, it looks like this looks like an officer in the background speaking to this woman. She does not look that bothered here, unless she's, I don't know. Interesting. But we end on this shot here where Picard is trying to reach Rios on that I still think it looks quite sharp comm badge, basically going, Rios, where are you? But obviously Rios is being led away, and that is the end of the episode. That is it. That is everything in Picard Season 2, Episode 3, Assimilation. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I enjoyed this episode. There are things that I didn't like, of course, and I've gone through those things that I didn't like. Raffi's aggression, Raffi's anger was probably the biggest annoyance, but there are also some tiny, small details that kind of irk me, just like the whole, is the ship assimilated? Well, if the ship's assimilated, then the Queen should just be able to take control of it. She does take control of it, so what's the problem there? My favourite aspect of the episode, though, is the Jurati Queen sequence, where Jurati is going through the Queen's mind and the Queen's going through Jurati's mind. I really think that this was probably Jurati's best episode. So a really good performance by Alison Pill, who in the past I've not enjoyed. I've not thought that she was... I've not been a big fan of her. Let's just put it like that. But here, yeah, good performance, and is really starting to kind of ease into that cyberneticist kind of genius, awkward genius nerd character. So, yeah. So, it's, I like that sequence. Now, some things that I would have suggested doing with it if they wanted to kind of potentially run the risk of overcooking that sequence is it would have been cool to have seen Jurati running through corridors, being chased by the Queen, walking into different rooms, and they could have put a cool kind of like visualization on what Jurati was going through. But the more I think about that, the more I kind of think that would have probably just overcomplicated the episode. We already kind of had enough going on, and I don't think it was needed. And sometimes the simple way is just the best way, and just two of them sat there with the Borg Queen just hovering over them was probably just effective enough. So no issues with that at all. I enjoyed that. I liked a lot of the stuff that we got in Los Angeles. Obviously easy to shoot, but the stuff with Rios as well. Rios is so likeable, such a likeable character, and it's interesting that he has potential kind of love interest or just a good ally character. Now, my speculation is that while they're waiting to be deported, they're probably going to be taken to a sanctuary district. So I think that what's going to happen is Rios is going to essentially kind of go through what Sisko and Bashir went through in past tense. So I think we're going to get a little bit of a return to that. But if you're holding out hope, going, oh, we're going to get a Ben Sisko cameo, we're going to see Bashir, we're not, because they're in different parts of the country. They're going to be taken to the sanctuary in LA. They're not going to be taken to the sanctuary in San Francisco. It would be lovely if it happened. It's not going to happen. The sanctuary is also going to look obviously very different to what we had seen in Deep Space Nine. It's going to look very similar to what we saw Raffi. in earlier. It's going to be a slum. It's going to be just a mess, and it's going to be very close to kind of what we know. I think it might look quite close to things that we know in real life, like Skid Row. So it's going to kind of have that vibe. That's my speculation there. But it'll be interesting to see how Rios and the Doctor navigate through what is probably going to be a very difficult, very scary scenario. Interesting to see what's going to happen with the Watcher as well. Like I said earlier on, I think the Watcher is going to turn out to be Laris, but I think they're probably going to go through a couple of iterations before finally landing on Laris. I think Laris will be a reveal, maybe towards the end of the episode. So yeah, that's also a cool thing to look forward to as well. But yeah, my favourite stuff was Jurati and Picard, and my least favourite stuff was the Borg Queen. One other thing as well, while at the beginning of the episode, when you had the three ships, the one Steamrunner class and the two Nova class, a cool thing that I would have done to kind of bring it all kind of full circle is, I think it would have been awesome if we would have had the World Raiser part of that fleet. And what I would have had is, if they all get taken out so easily because they're not got shields on or whatever, is you would have had the La Sirena destroy the World Raiser really easily. And what that could have been is, that could have been like because we see all this grandiose art and Picard is like this feared general. Well, what if the World Raiser was actually just not a very good ship, and it was all just part of Confederation propaganda? That would have been pretty cool. I would have enjoyed that, and that would have been a cool way to incorporate that very awesome looking ship that we only saw in an oil painting. So yeah, there we go. So that's pretty much my thoughts on Picard's third episode. Let's go back to the chat quickly just to see. You guys are talking good in the chat. Nice to see. Let's see what's going on here. So Cerstus, yeah, look back at episode 1 on the medical supplies that Seven was shipping. There's a butterfly on that. I think I saw that on Trek Core, so really good shout by those guys. Say they did grant the Borg Queen's request and made her some synthetic legs and gave her the ship. What do you think the Borg would do in that situation? Wouldn't be good, would it? She would probably revert back to the Borg's primary mission, primary mandate, and try and assimilate some stuff. I mean, she said that she wanted to add some more voices. She didn't like the sound. But let's face it, that wasn't going to happen. So it was just teasing some stuff, wasn't it? The future Borg Queen is Picard's mum, I'm telling you. I think it probably is. I hope not. The lookup was the giveaway. Yeah, I mean, but it could be a red herring. I mean, the things that we saw in this episode, particularly that last line that the Borg Queen says to Jurati, that you've impressed me. And there has been some speculation that Jurati could be the Borg Queen. And I think that would be insane. But it's possible. It's possible, right? Anything can happen at this point. In this parallel universe, that would mean Picard's mum was involved in space exploration and she became the Borg Queen somehow. Yeah. The timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff is confusing my brain. I don't think... I mean, that parallel universe, that Confederation, I just don't think that's going to be something that we go back to. And the memories that we saw at the beginning of the season, where you saw Picard's mum kind of being dragged very ominously through the doors, that's obviously Picard's memories from the Prime universe. So I kind of got the suspicion in that episode that they were kind of insinuating that the Borg came and took her then. But yeah, Cerstus, I don't see the connection about that First Queen being Picard's mum. The times just don't add up. But, I mean, you say that, the times don't add up, no, but Borg can probably live for a lot longer than we can, so that's possible. I don't know, it's so... A lot of stuff that could possibly happen. But yeah, the butterflies appearing in the episode as well. Very interesting. But I think that's just kind of callbacks to, don't go messing around with time. I think that might be Q kind of subtly subtly kind of giving them some sort of direction. One thing that I didn't actually cover in much detail, I said I was going to talk about it, but I didn't. I'm just going to find the image and I'm going to bring it up, is the Europa mission billboard. Where is it? Yeah, so here it is. So the Europa mission poster here. So we went over this earlier, but the new interplanetary explorers, the Europa mission to boldly go. I now suspect that Adam Soong is going to be a mission. He's either going to be two things. He's either going to be the mission director. He's going to be the person that's in charge of this mission, or he's going to be like some low-ranking kind of combination of like low-ranking working on Europa, completely dismissed and ignored, and he's kind of withdrawn within himself, and he's angry, and you know that's going to be the catalyst for whatever happens. I think that the Europa mission, I mean, this is here for a reason. This isn't just here to kind of go, oh, hey, look, it's 2024. I think this is directly linked to the divergence. This is the crucial point. So, and also noticing here as well that kind of looks like the Starfleet Delta. It kind of looks like what would eventually become the Enterprise mission badge as well. It's all cool. It all ties in. It's all very familiar. But I think this is very important, and I think Adam Soong is part of the organisation that's making this happen. That's my theory. And I reckon his daughter in this past is going to be played by Issa Briones. Probably not going to be called Soji, going to be called something else. And she'll be responsible as well. And perhaps she'll be pivotal to helping Adam Soong kind of see the light, see his way into kind of changing his mind and preventing the horrible future that is being teased from happening. So there we go. Well, that's pretty much it. They're all of my thoughts on Picard's latest episode, Assimilation. Let me know what you think, not only in the chat but in the comments afterwards. It will be really good to get your thoughts. I will be back next week at 8 p.m. GMT to talk about the next episode. We still don't know the episode title, but I imagine it will be something equally cool. I have to admit that despite some of the issues with this, you know, some of the little nitty-gritty issues and some of the things that don't quite connect and some of the things that don't quite make sense, they're not quite as glaring as they were in season 1, and I can kind of forgive some of it because the episodes are flowing so much nicer, the pace is so much better, there seems to be urgency to the story that they're trying to tell, and that makes me happy. I want to see how this story goes, and like I said, I'm going to avoid giving ratings and things like that because I want to see how this story pans out. I'm still very cynical about Picard. I'm still kind of convinced that at some point it's just going to kind of lose the plot and go absolutely mental and it's all going to fall apart. I really hope that's not the case, but if we consider where we were this time last season, the literal story had only just begun. We'd gotten so much kind of spinning the wheels by the end of episode 3, and we'd only just began the mission. Here, in season 2, we've reached the end of the 3rd episode, and so much stuff has happened already. The story's been propelled forward. There's a lot of intrigue there. There's a lot of mystery, and I, for one, have been thoroughly entertained despite the misgivings. Take those out even if you include those, there's still a lot to enjoy. And yeah, I'm really happy with what we're seeing. I'm really looking forward to episode 4. I hope you can join me. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about it next Sunday, 8 p.m. GMT. But before that, do join me this coming Friday, 8 p.m. GMT again, where I'm going to be breaking down episode by episode Star Trek Discovery Season 4. I've not watched all of it yet. I'm not really looking forward to it, to be completely honest, but we will see. I've heard mixed things about it. We will see how Season 4 of Discovery ends, so hope you can join me for that. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't already, like this live stream, like this video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will be back next Friday and again for Picard on Sunday. I hope you can join me then. Until the next time, stay happy, stay safe, and live long and prosper.